Like remember when everybody and their mom seemed to have a BlackBerry? I mean, you couldn't escape them, especially in the business world, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They were like the ultimate status symbol, the blinking red light, that clicky keyboard.
Total power move. And for anyone out there who's, wants to really grasp these pivotal tech stories, we're going to jump into a fascinating deep dive today, exploring how BlackBerry, this absolute titan, built itself up and then, well, had a pretty dramatic fall from grace.
Yeah, it's a classic rise and fall story, isn't it? And I think it offers some really valuable lessons uh, about how quickly things can change, especially in the tech landscape. What we'll be looking at specifically is BlackBerry's journey within the context of the smartphone market's evolution. It happened so fast.
It really did, and our guide for this exploration is a recent piece from Cognitive Market Research. Actually, it was published, just came out on March 21st, 2025, and it's titled "BlackBerry's Decline: A Case Study in the Smartphone Market's Rapid Evolution." Pretty straightforward, right? But really what we're aiming to do here is to like extract those essential insights, understand what made BlackBerry so successful initially, and then of course what were those critical missteps that led to its decline. So think of this as your cheat sheet, your shortcut to understanding a really crucial moment in modern tech history.
Right. So I guess the first question is, where do we even begin with this deep dive?
Yeah, like let's rewind back to the beginning. What was it about BlackBerry that made it so dominant in those early days?
Well, in the early 2000s, they really tapped into a need, especially for professionals who were, constantly on the move. And the research highlights a few key factors here. First off, their secure email services were a huge draw. Then you had that iconic physical QWERTY keyboard, which was just so familiar and efficient for a lot of people. And then on top of that, they were laser focused on providing solutions tailored for businesses. So this whole combination, right, really made them the go-to device for business professionals, government employees, corporate users, you name it. They were everywhere.
Oh, I remember. And you can't talk about early BlackBerry without mentioning BBM, right? BlackBerry Messenger. It was like this whole exclusive club almost. And they offered encrypted messaging way before it became mainstream.
Totally. Like way before WhatsApp and all that.
Yeah, and it created this real sense of like community and privacy. It was pretty cool.
It's interesting to think about why those features, in particular, resonated so strongly at the time. You had this secure email, which addressed this growing need for constant, instant communication in a professional context. And then that QWERTY keyboard, it provided this tactile experience that, for many, was just so much more productive for composing longer messages. It was so much better than those early touchscreen keyboards.
Oh, yeah. It was like night and day.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about the features themselves. It was also about what they represented. It was about efficiency, security, and these were things that spoke directly to the core needs of their target user. And that translated into some serious market power. By 2009, they had nearly 50% of the U.S. smartphone market. That's huge.
It's crazy. And the article really emphasizes just how vital those security features were. I mean, for organizations that handled sensitive data, I think, government agencies, big corporations, BlackBerry offered a level of security that, it was unmatched at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Features like centralized device management and being able to remotely wipe data if a device was lost or stolen, those were massive selling points, especially for IT departments. I mean, peace of mind, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, that physical keyboard, it wasn't just about the familiarity either. It also offered a level of precision that early touchscreens really struggled to replicate. For professionals who spent hours every day composing emails and reports and all those business communications. That tactile feedback and that ability to type without constantly looking down at the screen, that was a game changer. It was almost like an extension of using a computer keyboard, like you were saying.
Totally. I mean, they basically invented the market for enterprise mobility, didn't they?
They did.
It wasn't just selling phones. It was providing a secure way for companies to integrate those mobile devices into their existing systems, boosting productivity, all without compromising on security. And that dominance in the enterprise world, it gave them a really stable revenue stream and a super loyal user base. These were people who relied on those devices, those features, every single day.
And that leads to a really crucial point that the research highlights. BlackBerry, they had this really strong belief that their corporate-focused strategy, that it would just, continue to be relevant no matter what. And I think, in a way, you can kind of see why. They were so successful in that niche that they maybe didn't fully grasp the potential of this broader consumer market that was emerging with different priorities.
Right, right. And it's almost like a classic tale, isn't it? A company excels in one specific area, and then they just assume that that success will automatically translate as the market evolves.
Yeah.
But and this is a big but. The market did evolve, didn't it? And in a big way. 2007, Apple launches the iPhone, and it's a complete game changer.
It was. Suddenly you had this device with a full touchscreen, this incredibly intuitive user interface, and the promise of a whole ecosystem of apps. It was a totally different way of thinking about what a phone could be.
Exactly. And Apple, they took a very different approach, right? They were focused on the consumer experience first and foremost. Like, while BlackBerry was all in on the enterprise, Apple was envisioning a device that could handle communication, sure, but also entertainment and so much more, all through this seamless touch interface.
Yeah, they were thinking bigger picture.
And here's where things get really interesting. It seems that, at least initially, BlackBerry's leadership didn't really take the iPhone threat seriously.
Really?
Yeah, they really believed that that emphasis on security, that physical keyboard, that was going to continue to be what mattered most, both to their core users and, the wider market. It seems like they underestimated just how appealing that multimedia-rich, app-centric experience of a touchscreen device would be for consumers.
That's a big oversight, isn't it? To not see that shift in consumer demand coming.
A huge one. And by not recognizing the growing popularity of touchscreens and app ecosystems, well, they basically allowed Apple, and then later Google with Android, to gain some serious traction, especially with everyday users. It wasn't even just about the features anymore. It was about a fundamental shift in how people wanted to interact with their devices.
And when BlackBerry did finally try to enter the touchscreen game with the BlackBerry Storm in 2008, it sounds like it was already too late.
Oh yeah, the research suggests it was rushed to market, and it just had a ton of technical issues. That touchscreen implementation, it just wasn't very good, and the software, well, it really struggled to keep up.
Yeah, it was a bit of a disaster from what I understand, and unlike Apple's iOS, which was built from the ground up for touch, BlackBerry's operating system just wasn't really designed for it. And the result was a clunky user experience. It was nothing like the smooth, intuitive experience that iPhone users were already used to.
Yeah, they were already spoiled.
Right. And that really damaged BlackBerry's reputation. It made them seem, well, a bit behind the times.
Definitely. And while they were dealing with all of that, Android was emerging as this powerhouse alternative.
Oh, yeah, and the fact that it was open source was a big deal. It allowed all these manufacturers, like Samsung, HTC, Motorola, to innovate really quickly and offer a wide variety of devices.
And consumers loved having choices. I mean, they were increasingly drawn to devices with bigger screens, better app experiences, stronger multimedia capabilities, and, well, BlackBerry was lagging behind in all those areas.
It's interesting, isn't it, like how quickly those expectations changed.
Yeah, and the research really drives home the point that BlackBerry's struggles, they went beyond just the hardware. It was their software ecosystem, too. Apple and Google, they seemed to grasp early on that the phone itself was only one part of the equation. The software, the apps, those were just as crucial.
Absolutely. The launch of the App Store and Google Play in 2008, those were massive turning points. It created this whole vibrant marketplace for apps, and it fundamentally changed what people expected from their smartphones. It wasn't just about communication anymore. It was about entertainment, productivity, social networking, like a whole universe of possibilities.
And BlackBerry, for a long time, they had this pretty closed approach to third-party developers. And their operating system, it wasn't as developer-friendly as iOS or Android. And the result was that they just didn't have the same range of compelling apps.
Yeah, and you have to think about how the way people were using smartphones was changing. Social media, games, streaming video, those became central to the whole experience. And BlackBerry just didn't keep up. Think about it, like popular apps like Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, they were either completely absent on BlackBerry or they were just really bad versions. And that made the whole platform feel, well, kind of outdated.
They did eventually try to address this, right, with BlackBerry 10 OS in 2013.
They did.
But, as the article points out, it was too little too late. By then, developers had already invested so much time and energy into iOS and Android. So BlackBerry ended up with an app store that felt, well, kind of empty.
Yeah, it was pretty bare bones. And you could see why consumers wouldn't want to switch to a new phone if it didn't have the apps they used every day.
Exactly. And then there was their reluctance to fully embrace Android. They just kept developing their own operating system, even as their market share was shrinking. And by the time they finally did adopt Android in 2015 with the BlackBerry Priv, well, it was pretty much game over. The BlackBerry brand, it didn't have the same pull anymore.
It had lost its shine.
Yeah, and it really highlights the role that leadership and those big strategic decisions, those missteps, played in their downfall.
Oh, absolutely.
The article outlines a few pretty significant mistakes that the executives made.
Like what?
Well, first off, there was that initial failure to recognize the importance of touchscreens and the potential of iPhone and Android. Huge mistake. And then delaying the move to Android, they missed a crucial window to stay competitive in the mainstream market.
It's hard to imagine how different things could have been if they had just moved to Android sooner, isn't it?
Totally. And sticking with that focus on the enterprise market, even though it had been their strength for so long, that ultimately became a limitation. The consumer market was just exploding, and their core user base, it just wasn't enough anymore.
I guess they were just so used to dominating in that one area that they didn't see how quickly things were changing around them.
Exactly. And they also seemed to overestimate the appeal of security and the physical keyboard. Those were their core selling points, but the market was clearly signaling that other features were becoming more important to everyday users.
They missed the memo.
Yeah, they really did. And, it's a classic example of a company becoming so attached to what they're good at, to their core strengths, that they fail to adapt to the changing world around them. While companies like Apple, Samsung, Google, they were constantly innovating, building out those app ecosystems, focusing on those consumer-centric features, BlackBerry just seemed to be moving way too cautiously.
And by the time they tried to change course, it was too late.
Exactly. So stepping back and looking at the whole journey, what are the key lessons we can take away from BlackBerry's experience?
Well, the research highlights a few really important things. Firstly, it shows just how quickly market trends can shift, especially in the tech world. And ignoring those emerging technologies, like BlackBerry did with touchscreens, it can have really serious consequences.
It can be fatal, even.
Absolutely.
And the research also highlights the importance of a strong software ecosystem. I mean, BlackBerry's failure to attract developers, that really hurt their ability to compete with the big players like iOS and Android.
100%. And then there's that need for constant innovation. Companies can't just rest on their laurels. They have to be constantly evolving, meeting those changing consumer demands, adapting to new trends. If you don't innovate, you become obsolete. Simple as that.
And finally, and this is a big one, it's so important to listen to your customers, all of them.
Yeah, not just your existing ones.
Exactly. BlackBerry's focus on those enterprise users, while it made sense given their history, it meant that they might have missed some crucial signals from the broader market, from everyday users.
Yeah, they weren't paying attention to what people actually wanted.
Right, and ultimately it was BlackBerry's inability to fully embrace change, to innovate quickly enough, and to really understand and respond to those evolving consumer preferences that led to their downfall in the smartphone market.
It's a cautionary tale.
It is, and it's kind of fascinating that, as the article mentions, they've since successfully transitioned into the cybersecurity and enterprise software space, which shows that they can adapt. It happened in a different arena.
They found a new niche.
Yeah. So to quickly recap our deep dive today, we've traced BlackBerry's journey from their early dominance, fueled by secure email and that focus on enterprise, through their struggles to adapt to the touchscreen revolution and the limitations of their software ecosystem. We also looked at the impact of those key leadership decisions, those missteps that really contributed to their decline.
And there's this one fast fact in the research that I think really drives home the scale of this shift. BlackBerry's market share in the U.S., it plummeted from nearly 50% in 2009 to less than 0.1% by 2016.
Wow.
That's a huge drop.
That's a massive fall from grace. So for you, our listener, as you've been listening to this story, here's a final thought to consider. Think about other industries, other companies that you see today that might be facing similar disruptive forces. What lessons from BlackBerry's trajectory, from that delicate balancing act between staying true to your core strengths and embracing radical change, what lessons from that might be relevant to their future? It's something to ponder, for sure.